Good morning, Serena. Thank you so very much for spending time with us and sharing a few thoughts about leadership. Really appreciate that.
No, it's a pleasure to be here, Stephen. Really looking forward to this one. Always love a good chat with you.
Thank you very much. Actually, I'm wondering if you could share a few highlights of your career or your journey so far as a way of introduction of yourself to the audience here, who obviously haven't had the advantage of knowing you as well as I do.
Yes, I'm an athlete by trade. I'm now a retired athlete, and my bag was netball. So I was fortunate enough to lead my country, captain my country for a period of around 4.5 years, lead us into which was probably the most hyped up World Cup in modern day ball history after what was quite an incredible 2018 Commonwealth Games campaign when we won a gold medal. So I was almost the face of the team, so to speak, going into that major competition. But also our paths have met obviously and crossed through me being a student at Bath University, studying the EMBA, which was just an amazing experience. And your leadership module still to this day is my favourite module. And I think through my athlete career, my professional career, and obviously moving out of sport, continuing in the leadership space, consulting various kind of companies and industries around leadership, high performance, high performing teams and culture. That's my specialty, my bag, and something that I really love working within as well. But I'm also working within netball too. So they haven't managed to get rid of me just yet. And I've taken on a new role for Jersey Netball, currently living in Jersey as the performance lead for Jersey Netball as well. So very busy, but loving life. And I'm also a mother of one with another one on the way. So just adding more complexity to, to my life, but loving it at the same time.
Congratulations on all of those achievements, including the two young ones. So best of luck for the upcoming birth as well.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you if you could elaborate on one of the quotes I saw from you recently, maybe put a bit more texture to it or add some life to it. And if I may, I'm going to read it out so I don't quote you. You say, as leaders, we must be the architects of the non-tangible elements that are critical to creating the cultural energy we all dream to be a part of. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so this is something I truly believe is really important, one of the most important facets of leadership. I'm quite a more spiritual leader in a sense. I really do believe in energy and driving your people, and that people should be a barometer for your own success as a leader. And I've been in environments where culture and energy has really affected efficiency, success, productivity within teams versus environments where actually the culture has been great, the people truly believed in the vision and where the team's trying to drive things to, and also they've got real clarity within their role and how to do that. And this can create a really special atmosphere. And I think we've all probably been there, whether it's within our own families, within our own tribes, within our workplaces, where we literally get up out of bed in the morning and think, gosh, yeah, really looking forward to this, really want to be a part of this team success. And when people ask you about it, you can go, oh, I can't really explain it, but it's just something really special about that person or that group of people. And for me as a leader, that is essentially always what I'm trying to create. I'm trying to create an environment where people have a sense of belonging, they feel connected to, they feel a sense of purpose to. And whilst not all of those things in a business sense are measurable, I do believe if you can focus on your people rather than just the results can take care of themselves. So I do believe that's something that we should be shifting focus towards as leaders and not just focusing on the bottom lines or what stakeholders think or stretching ourselves too far. Because essentially your inner circle, your employees, your team, that's who you need to help drive any functions within what you're trying to do. For me, obviously, for a long time, it was trying to get a gold medal. It took us 12 years to do that. So a very long time. We got it wrong a lot. But eventually, when we did get it right, the cultural part of things was critical to that success.
So would you say culture is critical, but is that the extra 0.5% or it's the 20% that gets you going from an average to near the top?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think that's probably a really arguable point, isn't it? A debatable point, because I think there's certainly an element of context to culture as well. I think if I can link back to our 2018 Commonwealth Games campaign, prior to that campaign, England Netball weren't really known for having a really strong identity. So that was difficult for the people in the group trying to drive themselves towards success, because nobody really knew what it was and really understood what good looked like. And that was tough for us. So it meant if we did manage to do something well, or we did have a good performance, it just felt like we were just a one-hit wonder, rather than something that we were consistently building towards. So all the work that we had done between kind of 2014 to 2018 very much tried to focus on giving ourselves an identity. And then within that, understanding individually, how do we contribute to that and what does it look like, and trying to set some boundaries in place that we all believed in, bought into, that meant we could actually start to push the culture and the energy and our purpose forward in a meaningful way, rather than in ways that just meant we were brilliant individuals, but there was no true collective effort. So I think the context of where the organisation is at, or where the team is at, is really important to whether it is the tip of the iceberg, or potentially that 20% that, like you just spoke to, around actually making that shift towards performance.
Maybe can you bring out an example to illustrate that in that period, and also maybe an example of how the culture had such an impact at the time of the performance when you really needed it?
Yeah, so I remember we'd just been through our 2014 campaign, and part of the issue within the group was that we didn't feel like we deserved third. We were just good enough for first. And we hadn't really even discussed the fact that we might just come fourth or third or second. So to end up in a situation where you're not in a gold medal match, we hadn't spoken at all about what we would need to do in order to get up out of bed the next day in a good space, in a unified space, to perform and go and try and win this medal. And we might as well have not really showed up. And it was actually quite an embarrassing performance, which is an awful way to end a 4-year campaign where you've blood, sweat, tears had gone into that. And I remember one meeting that we had. So in between 2014, 2018, our head coach got removed just by overnight, just our leader removed from the team, which was a huge shock to us. Obviously, very abrupt, big changes, different personality overnight with our new leader, Tracy Neville. And it took a really long time for us to adjust as a group, because we didn't believe that we weren't doing badly, but we just weren't necessarily achieving the things that we wanted to achieve as a group. And so it took us a really long time to adjust. And I remember one meeting, and this was just before we were about to go into the village in 2018. We'd been a kind of 3-year adjustment period with Tracy, but we'd also got some brilliant results, and the team was tracking in a really confident space as we moved towards this campaign. And our training sessions were just awful. People were clearly under pressure. The coaches were under pressure. Players were getting a little bit narky with each other. It wasn't a comfortable space, and certainly not a space that we were all necessarily enjoying. And it was literally just because we were about to start, and very natural things. We're all human, we're all emotional. And our captain sat us in a room, and it was a dark room, actually. And we were like, it was a bit wacky. And Ahmed sat us in a room, and she'd lit some candles and just encouraged the group just to come back together. And all we spoke about were the non-tangible things that we could lean into. So the energy, the relationships that we had, maybe some of the stories that we'd been through, some of the good times, hard times, whatever you want to call it, not necessarily in just those 4 years, but also in the kind of 8 to 10 years that had been previous to this particular campaign. And I remember it being very powerful, because I think what people to realize and recognize was that actually this one little moment before we step into competition doesn't define the team. And just taking a moment to build through a timeline of your life events of that particular group, highs and lows, was just a kind of take stock moment for us as a group to go, actually, we've got this, we can handle this, that we don't need to worry that we haven't had 3 great training sessions in a row, because actually all the hard work has come before. And that was a good reminder to me, really, in my own life as well, just to take stock sometimes. We all go through ups and downs as leaders, but if we can just go, hang on a minute, what have we got? What have I got on my arsenal? Let me just have a look, because I'm pretty resilient, actually, if I go back and look through my timeline, and we've got through some pretty tough times. And that can just be a real confidence builder. And in the Roses, we like to call that something that we put into our confidence bank, which I think is quite a fun metaphor, because we're always banking little nuggets of whether it's information, skill sets, competencies, successes, small wins, big wins. And because we're in such a progressive environment, we never actually take a little bit of time to recognize how powerful some of the things we're collecting actually are. So that was one thing that's definitely stuck into my head. And I like to try and continue forward as well on my own leadership journey with people when times get tough.
I love that idea of a confidence bank, because you're saying it's something you can dip into in the future, but you're also making a conscious recognition of that point to build it up. And you haven't said, let's pretend everything's great right now, and therefore ignore it. You're facing reality, but you've got a well to go back to and tap into. It sounds like a great recommendation. In fact, I might steal it from you and recommend that to people around. But thank you. Switching a little bit, mate, there is oftentimes when we think about building up a team, we think about autonomy and empowerment and getting the best of individuals. But then we also think about the need for feedback and regulation to some degree for the norms in the team. I'm just wondering if you could talk to that tension a little bit. On the one side, autonomy and empowerment, on the other side, feedback and a degree of regulation. How does that tension play out in your experience?
Yeah, it's something that is you try to really fine line on. As a leader, you want to give autonomy and empowerment to your followers, to the people who are essentially buying into your leadership. But at the same time, you are responsible for driving whatever it is, whether it's a task, a project, or a wider goal, overarching goal. So the feedback element is really critical to making sure that the autonomy is functioning well and people are focusing on the tasks and activities that are actually going to contribute to the win. And if we give too much rope, so to speak, we can risk that freedom aspect that comes with autonomy, actually risking the win. So I think for feedback to be effective, first of all, it needs to be really regular. And I don't believe it needs to be in a big kind of half-year appraisals or anything like that. Something that sport has taught me is that regular feedback achieves results quicker because you're able to, first of all, check in with each other. So actually have a conversation, whether it's virtual these days or face-to-face, but how are you doing? What's going on in your life at the moment that's actually preventing you potentially operating at your best? And this whole kind of lean in method, I suppose, where I can say to you, hey, Steve, I'm struggling with this, and leaning into your team. And that element of vulnerability that can come with feedback, because we all have to put ourselves in this kind of vulnerable space, right? Because it's all, I'm doing something. I think I'm doing it to the best of my ability, but right now someone might tell me that I'm not, or it's not what it needs to be at, or the quality is slightly different and things like that. The element of vulnerability that comes with feedback requires your team to support you. You can't just put somebody out on their own and then not support them with it. And I think as a leader, sometimes we can forget that because we're quite busy. I'll just go off and do that again. And the tone is wrong. We don't look like we've given it enough time. So the perception is that maybe that person's not feeling valued, and it's not the case. So I think it's up to us as leaders to scope out the time, carve out the time, but also make sure we're not making too big of a thing of it. Because one of my favorite parts around feedback is the fact we have then the opportunity to have some extreme ownership over what our team is doing. So what I love about extreme ownership is that your problem is my problem. Doesn't matter how big or small. If there's something that someone in your team is potentially failing on, or they're not having the success or the progression that they would like, that's the team's problem. And that's something I really love about what I've learned through sport. Because if I've got a goal shooter who doesn't understand a particular tactic or a centre pass, that's the whole unit's problem. I can't just carry on in my own space going, she'll figure it out and I'll just carry on what I'm doing, because at the end of the day, she's responsible for getting the ball in the net. So that's a critical aspect to netball, because it's the highest score wins, right? So if you've got somebody in your team or a cog in your wheel that isn't quite being as effective, it's going to affect the whole machine. So what I love about feedback is that you can actually bring everybody on that journey, rather than making it about one particular function, one particular person, and just, again, really focus on what actions, activities, or behaviors might need to change in order to make the whole thing successful, not just your area. So I think it needs to be regular. It needs to be owned by everybody. And I think carving out the time and space for it is really key. And I think if you can do that, you lift the sense of value, but then also you create really robust people and high trust environments where mistakes aren't feared anymore because people know that everyone's going to help them. So the level of vulnerability comes down, and I think the psychological safety can go up. And again, if I link it back to my quote at the beginning around the non-tangible elements of an environment, those are the things that, whilst necessarily you can't measure it, you feel it. Everybody knows what good support feels like. Everybody knows how they feel inside when they feel like they've got psychological safety. And those things, I think, are really key aspects to performance in organizations and in teams as well.
There's a lot in there. Thank you. I'm going to try and build a little bit on what you said. You want people to be playing at their full potential, or playing their role in whatever team at their full potential. And I love this concept of extreme ownership and frequent feedback. I'm wondering if there's a risk of heightened conflict as some individuals who feel they're the superstar on the team, for want of a better word, perform very well with this sense of extreme ownership might become quite attacking to individuals they feel are not pulling their weight. Could you talk a little bit around that sort of management of that dynamic where you want extreme ownership, but you want people to be building one another up rather than having conflict?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And I think this is probably something that we've all experienced as leaders, not necessarily just your superstar talent, but also people who have been in the organization for a long time. You're 10 years plus, 15 years plus, really understand the political side of the team and how things work, and also potentially then able to fox their way out of certain situations in a conflict situation because they just have a better understanding of maybe how things work or how they want to move some pieces in order to put their case forward a bit more strongly and things like that. So I think as a leader, it's important to be able to have open and honest conversations with your talent, with the people who you know are really going to get you results. But what I've always found in my experience is those people cannot become bigger than the team. So the ego side that comes with that, I think that's the most difficult part to manage. But it can be managed if you're open and you're transparent with your messaging, with your own boundaries. Yes, you're brilliant at what you do, but what you're doing at the moment, you're risking the team because you're not willing to take on X, Y, and Z of this issue, which is linked to you. I've had a few instances where I've had, as I wasn't say I was an old captain, there are people in my team who were older than me trying to push boundaries around things like travel, wanting to go home after test series and things like that. But what was really important is that we actually made sure that we finish things as a group. We come in, we have an initial briefing to start a competition. We have to have a debriefing as a whole group to end the competition. It's really important everybody's voices are heard within that kind of feedback loop cycle between tours, between big competitions. And I would have players trying to book flights and do things to leave early. And so this causes a riff, right? Because it's like, why does she get to do this? Just because she's experienced and a talent in the group. And actually, we're having to manage our schedules and all this, that, and the other. So that can create cracks in a group and in culture, right? So as the leader, I actually made a decision to bring these issues and challenges to the group and say, what do we do? Our belief system is that everybody starts and everybody finishes. So this is what I think we should do, but we need group buy-in so we can go and move forward together. And we made the decision to put one of our debriefs at like 6 a.m, something was stupidly early, which we didn't need to do. But because this one player, she wanted to leave early to go home, okay, fine, we do that, but we debrief at 6 a.m. And rather than having it out with somebody going, you're not doing this, or it's actually getting them to understand that there are consequences to your decision making when other people are involved with you, when you're part of a team. And so making that group decision to bring it forward, one, that person didn't feel particularly great. She didn't want to hurt anybody. She was just making a decision. But unfortunately, decisions have consequences. And so bringing that into the whole group and saying we're going to own this consequence as everybody actually helped manage the conflict in a sense, because we all just got on board with the situation. That person didn't feel great, but it didn't happen again, because it was getting people to understand that actually your actions impact us. My action as a leader will impact you and vice versa. And it doesn't matter whether you're a captain, a vice captain, experience, 1 cap, 50 cap. If this is the boundaries that we set within ourselves for the team, it's really critical that we uphold that. Because as soon as one person goes and does it, what's to say that one little young'un who's come into the group, she's 2 years experience, but in 10 years does the same thing. And then the next young person sees it and they go, that's a behaviour that's accepted. And I think when it comes to conflict, one of my favourite quotes of all time is, we accept the standards that we walk past. And when you think about trying to have healthy conflict, if you were to think about every time you saw something that you didn't like, you had the capacity just to go, just checking in here, just really curious about that, we haven't agreed to that, or whether we just walk past it, the impact that one moment can have is really important in teams. And it could be something like the way an employee is spoken to another employee, or lateness, something really simple, but can really grind on certain people when time is money in many organizations. So always putting yourself in the forefront of, is this something that you're willing to accept? And it could be a really small thing, but ultimately it's almost like we speak about micro wins for macro gains. It's the same with conflict. When we see these things happening, we're able to pull up it at a micro level, then we're able to then stop it getting to this macro mountain out of a molehill when we're not really understanding where it's all come from, because everybody's seen different things.
Yeah.
And when it comes to conflict, actually ensuring that people have an understanding that you might see it this way, but I don't see it that way. And Stephen doesn't see it this way, actually, because we've told the team that we have to adhere to certain things. This, on the perception point of view, you've got lots of different people taking that in 10 or 15 different ways. And that can also create more conflict because people will take what they will from that depending on their view of the world. So it's an interesting one, and it's a difficult one to manage. But I do think you need to hit it head on. And for me, keeping that phrase in mind, we accept the standards that we walk past as a leader, is something that you can put into your role modeling. It's something that you can action as well. And again, just keeps yourself accountable, even on the days where you don't necessarily want to have conflict, going, okay, let's pull myself back here and let's just check in. And coming from a place of curiosity or care, I like to call it care chatter. If you really care about somebody, I want to let you go out on a hot date, Stephen, with a bit of spinach in between your teeth because I care about you. I'm going to tell you about it. So similar thing with conflict. You go to someone because I actually care about the goal that we're trying to achieve, and I care about your role within it. So let's have a chat, because at the moment this isn't happening, or we're not progressing in this area. You can completely reframe a whole conversation coming from a place of care and curiosity. And that can be quite powerful as well when it comes to conflict.
Great. Really powerful. Thank you. And just to build on that sentence, we accept the values we walk by, really resonates with me. I think that it also ties into moral courage. It's very easy to have a dialogue with ourselves, which we walk past the values, we don't intervene or don't say anything. And that's really because we don't have moral courage to say something. So understanding that we have to grow our courage, and our courage grows by practice, forcing ourselves not to walk by, but to actually say something. And to say something, as you're saying it, from a position of curiosity and care is a very good way of trying to attenuate the negative response that might occur. I just wanted to finish off, if I may, with, okay, so you've done this transition from your role as a professional athlete, leading the national team, and obviously now in the corporate world, giving advice. What would you say are the sort of the one or two key leadership traits that are most translatable from what you saw previously that now really resonate when you bring them to your clients and to the other work you do?
Just two. So I think the first thing for me is integrity. And what I mean by that is showing up. So doing what you say, what you do or don't do, or say or don't say, really matters to people. So that integrity piece and that value of having integrity as a leader, I think, is something that sometimes we pick up and put down depending on how we're feeling, depending on what's going on with our life, our personal lives as well. So I think that's something that I see quite often in companies or with clients or with people that you meet, when it's almost like when life is good, like integrity is brilliant, like you're doing what you say, you're role modeling, you're first in, you're last out potentially, people see you, you're really available, but all of a sudden it's end of quarter three, something's going on, and all these brilliant things that you want to adhere to just drop off the cliff essentially, until you were in a space that we feel like we can take more on again. So I think it's really important when I do speak to clients, I talk about this element of consistency. Consistency is so important as a leader. You don't want to pick up something, first of all, that you can't continue on. And sometimes we get ourselves caught up in having to be everything to everyone all at the same time. And that puts our integrity at risk, because once a follower or someone who's buying into your leadership sees you do something, especially if it has there's a high impact kind of effect on that person, on that particular team, for that to then just, or that level of support or whatever it might be, to then not be there all of a sudden can be quite confusing and essentially challenge or put the trust at risk, right? And people aren't stupid. People are extremely smart. Most people have a high level of emotional intelligence as well. So people can see through these things. And whilst that might not be your intention to potentially put those things at risk, that's the impact of it. So I think the integrity piece is really, whilst it's more of a moral, linked to maybe more of a moral kind of energy, I suppose, that is something that I think is really key to having a healthy followership and a sustainable followership. People that don't want to leave teams, don't want to leave the company, they want to stay with you because they know that they're going to get a good level of consistency when under pressure. And it's usually under pressure is when these types of traits or characteristics start to dwindle a little bit. So that would be my first one. My second one would be vulnerability. I think this is something that is being required and asked of more and more these days, because the environments that we are all operating in are so fast moving. I think is it some crazy statistic this year that over half the world will be voting. So politically, things are changing, like we're going to be changing colossally, potentially throughout the world over the next kind of 2 to 3 years. There's new policies and things getting in place with new leaderships potentially. And I do think like the environments that we're working in at the moment, realistically, how much can we keep up with as leaders? Realistically, we're thinking about all the different macro external potential things that can impact on what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. And we don't have all the answers. I think it's more okay than ever that we live in a world where it's okay to say that we don't have all the answers. And the most important aspects of vulnerability is the opportunity that comes with that. So rather than thinking of it as something that's more of a weak trait or a female trait, it's been really attached to for quite a long time, a female leadership trait, vulnerability, weakness. Actually, for me, vulnerability is there's such a strength to it, because already you've got, for me, it's telling me, if I had someone say, I don't have all the answers, but I believe that the people in this room do, I'm already feeling this element of empowerment going, I can help this guy or this woman. And with vulnerability comes, I think, great responsibility, because all of a sudden you've got followers or people going, God, they need my help. How cool is that? How nice is it to feel needed and valued when you turn up to work? Because your leader's going, I can't do this, but maybe you could do that. And something that, even I make a joke of it now, but I remember before I did retire, my team used to say, I just didn't do anything. You're like, you don't really do anything, do you? You just delegate all the time. I was like, yeah, but it's because I believe in this team so much. The strength in it was ridiculous. So why not lean into your people and help them to grow as well? So there's not any opportunity around maximizing your team, but there's opportunity that the people around you are going to grow, which is what we want. So I think vulnerability brings such great opportunity. And I think it's more than ever, we've got to lean in. We've got to lean into the talent. The war for talent is still a hot topic. People wanting to really shop around and see what's out there. So I think one way to really keep people on board is to show them how much you value them on a personal level. and using their competencies. And that's something that I've learned in my job currently, as well as performance lead, is that even if I wanted to do it all on my own, I couldn't, because there's just things that I'm really terrible at and it would put the win at risk.
Thank you very much. Profound answers, profound insights. It's a shame you couldn't be here in person this year. Hopefully you can join us in person next year. But I wish you all the best with your endeavors, your pregnancy, and everything you're doing. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Stephen. Always a pleasure. I'd quite like to interview you next time, actually, because I'm sure you've got some good thoughts on some of those questions as well.
Pleasure. Absolute pleasure.